I'll just say that in those local offices, there's job exploration counseling, workplace learning experience, counseling on post-secondary education. You can do like workplace readiness training to develop social skills and independent living, kind of like those soft skills, like can you talk around the water cooler and make people feel comfortable around you, how to like stick up for yourself, and also like getting young people as they're coming out of high school and getting them into employment and other careers. All right, so the slide that we have now, this is one of our customers that was placed at one of our employers that we connected to. And career seekers with disabilities, there's a certain eligibility. And so what we're trying to do is to increase their employability, help them with job search, help them get placed, and also make sure that if they've got any sort of lost their job and they need to get back in the workforce, those sort of things. So the type of people that we're able to assist, they have to have a disability that results in a substantial impediment in getting being part of the workforce. Multiple services from VR will be something that would benefit them, and that the individual is motivated like to go to work, and we want to meet them at that spot. So integrated business team members should be listening for folks that have these kind of qualities for them to make an appropriate referral with the Division of Rehabilitation Services. Next slide, please. Now, once a person with a disability is referred over to the Division of Rehabilitation Services, that could happen in any way. People can walk in, make a phone call, we have a website that you can do your own referral. You can email us and express your interest in employment. So people can do that on behalf of a person with a disability, and you want to complete that. Once the referral is made, we have our staff do an initial interview. Then we need documentation to determine whether or not the qualification of a disability is met. And if you have your documentation ready, this can make it much faster to get the process going for certification. And within 30 days of the referral, we'll need to get that documentation done. The application gets people to certification, which then determines that the person meets the eligibility requirements and that we can move over into individualized plan for employment. So the individualized plan for employment is like an iterative process, like we're going back and forth between each other. There's a dialogue. And what we do is we look at or review, our staff review. These are all master level staff. And so they review medical and psychiatric and other types of documentation. They look at like a person's ability to participate in major life activities, such as being involved in the community, in their home, like how are they able to manage their home, be at school and at their job, and how does all of those factors impact their employment. Then we also look at the functional abilities of someone. So like how are they able to get around mobilize themselves? How are they able to, self-care, bathing and dressing, cleaning their home, like self-direction, telling themselves like what they need to do, like kind of executive functioning sort of stuff. What are their work skills? How do they tolerate work? How do they socially get along with people? And how do they communicate with people? And that part all has to take within 60 days of that's the certification part. And so that all leads into the individualized plan for employment, the IPE, and then that is a co-signed document between our counselors and the customer, the person with a disability, so that we are clear about the career goals and so we can start doing the task. And then we get to placement, where a person is stable in a job for at least 90 days. So we want to make sure that 3 months after a person gets a job that they are able to stay in the job. All right, next slide. So I wanted to go a little bit more deeply into the IPE. And with the IPE, you are able to get career planning and get referred to other information. For young people in high school, like those teenage years from 14 to 22, we help with job exploration counseling. Work, like I mentioned earlier, work-based learning experiences, like what's going on for your post-secondary experience, and social skills and how to stick up for yourself or self-advocacy. So all of the things that we talked about, we really are specific about people with disabilities, but then we narrow it down to the person's individual needs. And this slide actually is a person who was being paid sub-minimum wage as a person with disability. And you can see with his coworker in an integrated setting, we were able to get him a job that had minimum wage and above. Okay, next slide. So a little bit more about just want to make sure you all know how to sign yourselves up. You know, people can walk in, they can call, they can go on our website, email us. You need to make sure that you are interested in getting, in having a career, and we'll make sure that we move into that application step. Remember that chart of the arrow within 30 days. And if there's any employers out there, or of employers that are looking for a diverse talent pool, we have an email address here. It's IDHS-DRS workforcedevelopment@illinois.gov. And this is what our local office staff in Chicago doing a recruitment table at an exposition in the suburbs of Chicago. So I wanted to thank you all very much and hand it over to my wonderful friend and leader, Stephen Dennis. Thank you.
All right, there we go. I'm off mute. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being part of today's webinar. Thanks to Nate and Jordan for the introductions and including me on this training as well. So as you heard, my experience in the past 20-something years has been HR, labor relations, but one of those job duties that I performed was being the Americans with Disability Act coordinator for almost 20 years. So as you can imagine, in the labor arena, the HR arena, dealing with grievances, negotiating contracts, any kind of labor relation issues, discharging employees, the hardest job that I've ever had to do was being the ADA coordinator. So I think it was extremely difficult just because the fact that the law changes constantly. There's so many different gray areas when it comes to handling people with disabilities. And I think the biggest obstacle that I saw was just the lack of knowledge that management staff and just employees had when dealing with people with disabilities. So a lot of times in my experience, we would see people that would come in with a disability, and the easy thing to do would just push it aside and say, we're not going to handle this issue. It was an easy thing to do. And I'll talk more about that throughout the training. So creating an accessible work environment all began, in 1990 when we had the Americans with Disability Act, and then there was the amendment in 2008. So it clearly opened the door for, the inclusion to employment for people with disabilities. However, to date, we still see many barriers that exist. We see many hurdles that exist in the workplace. One of the big things I saw in the workplace was just labeling people as preconceived notions that this person has a disability, so they'll never work out. So a lot of times as the ADA coordinator, I'd see a situation where maybe a supervisor dealt with somebody who had ADHD in the past. And the next employee that comes into the workplace, they have ADHD and they say, well, it never worked out with this employee, so it's not going to work out in the future as well. So it's just a big label that they get grouped together in preconceived notion that, once you have a disability, all disabilities and all people are treated the same way. And it's the farthest thing from the truth. So they can actually be the most talented individuals in the workplace if given the opportunity. So today I'm going to talk about very briefly this topic. We could probably talk for a whole day on this topic, but we're going to talk about, different barriers that exist today, how to create an inclusive culture in the workplace, and also the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities. So the first slide, and Jordan already has it up, is just talking about barriers for employees with disabilities. I think the first one is people assume that it's going to be more costly. So they believe that a person with a disability is someone that they're going to have to invest a lot of time with, a lot of money with, to make them a successful employee. As my experience as an ADA coordinator, I can tell you that's probably the farthest thing from the truth. So in many situations with accommodations in the workplace at the Secretary of State's office, which I did it for 15 years, the cost was usually $500 to basically zero. So you'd see accommodations like someone may need to relocate their office to maybe a corner where it was a little quieter. Maybe their office the lights had to be dimmed, and you had an electrician that came in that worked for the state that maybe altered the lighting in there. Maybe they needed a special lamp. Maybe their cubicle needed, walls around it just to make it more soundproof. Ergonomic work chairs maybe cost a couple $100. So the assumption that things were more costly, usually very seldom did we run into a situation where something was too costly. The hiring process for employment for people with disabilities can be a huge barrier as well. I was fortunate enough to be the HR director for 3.5 years. And the hiring process can scare a lot of people. For the state of Illinois, we've had a big change in the hiring process over the last 3-4 years. And for any individual without a disability, it's extremely difficult. So somebody who has a disability, it's even harder. So the biggest thing I can say is from start to finish, if you have your hands on anything with hiring, if you have your opportunity to give input, is just to make sure that, people with disabilities are able to be reached. Probably the biggest thing that I would stress that I see managers and staff can handle is job descriptions. So make sure job descriptions are as accurate as possible. So we used to preach when you're filling a position, make sure you look at the job description, make sure all the duties on the job description are accurate. So too many times people would fill a position, they may submit a job description that's been utilized for 20 to 30 years and is so inaccurate for the workplace that it pushes people away with disabilities. So you can have a situation where it's putting restrictions on a job that does not really exist. It could scare people with disabilities, but another issue is it could become a liability and a legal nightmare for a place of employment. So I would have people come to me as the ADA coordinator and they would say, this person with a disability is not working out because they're supposed to answer the phone 5 days a week, 7.5 hours a day. We would pull the job description and lo and behold, it would say it's not an essential part of the job. They only do it 20% of their time. So from that perspective, trying to say it's the essential part of the job is not true and accurate. So if I have to stress one thing in the hiring process, I would say definitely make sure job descriptions are accurate. The next bullet point is the fear of negative judgment. Many surveys and studies show that people with disabilities, they believe that, people behind the scenes will ridicule them, that they're underestimated in the workplace. There's definitely implicit bias towards them. And they have that fear that they can't perform the job because that's the way they're perceived in the workplace. And it goes from everything from performance reviews to promotions. I had a great working relationship with the deaf and hard of hearing employees at the Secretary of State's office. And I was able to communicate with them quite frequently about how they were viewed in the workplace. And no pun intended, but they just wanted to be heard. They wanted to be a group of individuals that wanted to be heard in the workplace. And it went a long way in wiping out the fear they had of being, trying to be a successful employee in the workplace. And I do have, and I apologize, I don't have the report. I can't find where I got the report, but they said a third of the people with disabilities that were surveyed actually said they experienced negative bias in the workplace and feeling underestimated, insulted, excluded, or coworkers appear uncomfortable. And they said that was up to 29% of the people felt that way. The next bullet point is lack of accessibility in the workplace. There are so many different tools for accessibilities in the workplace for employees. The absence of, wheelchair ramps. This could be physical. This could be physical things like wheelchair ramps don't exist, automatic doors. It could be stuff like assistive technologies and having braille devices in the place of employment. Currently, something that I do since the start of the year is I actually work with our DHS team and our Department of Information Technology team, and we collaborate bi-weekly. So we try to find ways in which the lack of accessibility in a workplace can be better for the governor's office, for all agencies, and we just continue to brainstorm and try to make the workplace suitable for people with disabilities. The next bullet point, unwillingness and unsure how to accommodate employees in the workplace. I think this is a big one. So as the ADA coordinator, people with disabilities would file an accommodation request in the workplace. And basically it would get to the supervisor and they would automatically deny it. So part of the Americans with Disabilities Act is to make sure that all parties are engaging in the interactive process. So I kind of changed the format a little bit where supervisors can give recommendation and myself and the committee, we can actually make the final determination. So, we want to make sure we're following the law and doing the right things. So I would make sure that there was conversations between the supervisor and myself and how we can actually make this make this successful in the workplace for an employee with a disability. So, like I said, so many times it's very not cost related that are the issues. It's just the knowledge that's lacked by a supervisor, and there's easy ways to resolve issues. And a lot of times I will say you don't always have to make the accommodation. We were probably at like a 98% rate that we would actually make an accommodation for an employee. And we took the stance that whether you have a disability or not, the important thing is to make sure employees have the tools they need to succeed. So whether that person has a disability or not, is we want to make their employee the best person in the workplace as possible. So there are many situations where somebody would ask for an accommodation, for example, like an ergonomic workstation, that they didn't meet the threshold that was needed under the Americans with Disability Act, but we knew it was the right thing to do. So that's the approach. They had a medical condition, but maybe it wasn't an ADA condition. So we were very proactive in making sure we got employees, giving them every tool possible to succeed in the workplace. The last bullet point is the liability issues. There's many myths out there that exist that the courts are flooded with lawsuits over ADA issues, and just doing a lot of research over the years. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which enforces the ADA law and the Act, they find different ways to litigate issues and make sure that they're resolved before it becomes an actual court case or a potential problem. So people are very proactive in doing the right thing. And I think once again, at our level, making sure that the right, stakeholders enforce, the interactive process, engage in communication and making sure people are talking. There's so many different laws out there. Like I said, the ADA Act, Department of Labor, just making sure that, employers are following what they're supposed to do in the workplace. Next slide, please. So we have here on this slide some strategies to promote a culture of inclusion for employees with disabilities. The first bullet point talks about training, changes in training programs. And like today's training, it makes you more aware of how you work towards a culture to improve for people with disabilities. So there's trainings that I've given in the past to the department, or it was the Illinois housing community. They didn't have any awareness on a culture for people with disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You can adapt trainings, contents to make it more accessible for persons with disabilities. You can try to get leadership to buy into maybe offering different training seminars for inclusive training for people with disabilities. And probably the big one that I'm seeing a lot right now that I'm doing a lot is Americans with Disability Act training. Believe it or not, I'm doing a lot of general training on that issue. And I think it would be really beneficial for supervisors and all employees, wherever that place of employment is to teach people about the process. How does it work? What you're supposed to do in situations when somebody has a disability and needs help in the workplace. So there's different training tools that are available for people out there. Mentoring programs. I think this is a big one too. It can be a very powerful tool to help people with disabilities in the workplace. For one, it can help them further develop their skills in the workplace. And most importantly, I think it builds confidence. So it allows them, like a safe environment to be able to talk to somebody, to ask questions. It gives them a comfort zone to feel accepted in the workplace. So to me, I view the mentoring program as a big, big support system for a person with a disability. So if you are going to do a mentoring program, if one exists in a place of employment, just make sure the goals are clearly defined. There's constant communication. But I think this is a big one. It can actually assist people with a disability once they get into the workplace. Provide better access to work sites. This could be both physical changes to the workplace and cultural changes, like all the stuff we already talked about with training and mentoring. You can have different, make sure, the Do It team, technology teams are involved, making sure that we have accessibility abilities out there with software, different lamps, lifts and ramp access, accessible parking. So just better access to the worksite for persons with disabilities. Next bullet point is restructure jobs when possible. So, instead of scaring people with disabilities and making them scared that they're afraid to apply for a position, uh, like when we talked about job descriptions, making it, more flexible for people with disabilities to apply for a job. Big things that I saw as an HR director and also in the labor relations field was you would see a job description that would say employees must be able to lift 50 pounds or employees must have a driver's license. So right away, I mean, that could scare a person with a disability away. They may not have the ability to lift 50 pounds. So the next question becomes, is that an essential part of the job? So at Secretary of State's office, for example, we had public service representatives, and their main function was to give road exams to the state of Illinois to the citizens. And in their job description, it actually said that they must be able to lift 20 pounds. So of course, as the ADA coordinator and HR person, it's like, so what can they possibly need to lift? That's 20 pounds. That's an essential part of the job. And lo and behold, it was maybe a box or a ream of paper they had to load to print documents. So you'd have a facility that had 20 PSRs in it, and everybody had to have the ability to lift 20 pounds. So that's a perfect example of restructuring your job where it wouldn't be an essential function of the job. It could be it may lift 20 pounds because you have 19 other people that actually can perform that job duties. So it's just being very creative and finding ways that are going to work for, an agency and organization and meeting the operational needs, but also being able to capture people out there that are being turned away because they're afraid to apply for something because they don't think they're qualified enough. Advocate for inclusive policies and practices. This one, I see a lot of, some of the training I've done so far. For example, I don't mean to pick on the Illinois Housing Authority, but they're very blunt with me, and their policies were over 30 years old. And I don't know why this sticks in my mind, but when I was working at the Secretary of State's office, some of our policies were 1992, and I was working on those policies in 2007, 2008, 2009. But that gives you an idea when policies go in and practices go in. Sometimes they stay for a long time and things just change over time. So it's good to, collaborate, brainstorm, get with different people and think about how you can be better. You got to make certain changes to policies and practices just because changes in the law. Uh, and actually, there's so many changes because of COVID. So a lot of bad things happen from COVID, but there's also a lot of good things too. For example, remote work. That is a huge thing for people with disabilities. It's actually opened the door and provided many opportunities that didn't exist. Maybe they couldn't travel before. So, if that's the case, then the practice and policies make sure, that stuff gets in job descriptions, that gets in policies, and allows more flexibility for people with disabilities to apply for certain jobs. Next slide, please. Some of the benefits of hiring people with disabilities, some of these are obvious. Some of the studies, a study by Accenture, which is the American Association of People with Disabilities, they actually reported that businesses that actively seek to employ people with disabilities have a higher revenue. It's 28% in profit margins than those that didn't hire people with disabilities. So being able to tap into people with disabilities is more profitable for businesses. Diverse cultures. Beyond the obvious, the numbers, the hiring employees, it actually creates a very diverse workplace. So something that you can think about is that, people with disabilities encounter, hurdles and obstacles all the time. So by bringing a person with a disability into the workplace, sometimes they look at things in a different way. So you take somebody who doesn't have a disability, their framework and their mind thinks one way, a person with a disability thinks another way, and it's a better diverse culture, and it makes you actually stronger. And the best way I can think about this is like, for example, like a sports team. You take a baseball team and you don't put nine, hitters and sluggers and home run hitters on one team and expect it's going to be a successful team. So if you take a baseball team and you have a couple home run hitters, a couple people that can steal bases, a couple people that are good defenders, and it just makes the team overall better. So that's the best example I can give for making a diverse culture and including people with disabilities. Turnover rates. So we all know it's very hard for people with disabilities to find jobs, but surveys show that once they do find the job, they like to stick around. So they're not the type of employee that people with disabilities that like to bounce from job to job. So once you get them and, a person with a disability is a really good employee, it's our job to make sure we're doing the things we can to make them successful every single day. And that goes for all employees. So I know this focuses people with disabilities, but we should be doing that for all employees, quite honestly. So, so they have people with disabilities have a very high level of satisfaction. And like I said, when you get a really good person with a disability, try to keep them, try to do the things necessary to keep them in the workplace and be successful. Untapped market. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2022 stated that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities was nearly twice that of people without a disability. They said 30% of employees with a disability had a part-time job compared to only 16 for workers without disabilities. So basically what that's saying is, once again, there's a lot of untapped talent that's out there for people with disabilities. So once again, going back to what we talked about earlier is be flexible, find ways to capture those people. Make sure, if you have the ear of upper leadership, management teams, give your opinion, say this is how maybe we can get people with disabilities into the workplace. It could be a huge benefit for your office. Tax advantages, I do have to admit, I do have an accounting degree, and I do have to admit I've never used it. So, um, but there are different tax advantages that exist. I don't know exactly, how it worked for a business or anything, but I just listed some of them just so everybody could see. There's a disabled access credit. There's a barrier removal tax deduction. And then one people probably heard a lot about is the work opportunity tax credit as well. And then I did put a little link in here for success stories that DHS has. Just preparing for this and in just my short period of time with DHS, I found that link interesting and found some really good success stories that have happened at DHS. Next slide, please. Some resources for employees with disabilities. The first bullet point, Job Accommodation Network. This is an unbelievable, if you haven't used it before, it's just an unbelievable website to go to. It gives all different ways to create a more disability inclusive workplace. I've used this site for probably 20 years. Extremely beneficial for recruiters and hiring managers, supervisors, managers, accommodation experts, technology teams. It is so helpful. You can actually go in and plug in a disability, and it's going to give you like all different ways that you can accommodate a person with a disability. So, what can work for one person may not work for another, but it just lists everything. Very reachable. They have webinars all the time. I sit through webinars. They have different toolkits that exist, but if you've never been to the website, I strongly recommend go out there. And like I said, it's a great tool to use, especially when you have questions. I mean, so many different resources it provides to help places of employment with people with disabilities. Another one, Great Lakes ADA Center. This one, once again, this one's excellent too. Their mission is to make people increase their awareness on, how to reach the goals and helping people with disabilities in the workplace. Another great website that I've used. I've talked to them personally on the telephone. They have all different information that can help assist people that have people with disabilities in the workplace. The ADA National Network, I have not used that one a lot just because the first two are so good, but they do have supposedly 10 regional centers. They provide a lot of ADA information and training and technical assistance across the nation as well. And then the last bullet point was the ADA.gov. Next slide, please. So this one I just kind of plugged in there because I thought it was important, and I was just trying to think of a way to kind of close out my training session. But the Global Accessibility Awareness Day was May 16th. It actually was our 13th Awareness Day. And honestly, I was never really aware of this day. So Director Patrick, don't hold that against me. I just thought it was important. I mean, these are different ways where the purpose is to get people talking, to thinking about, access, inclusion for people with disabilities. So, places of employment should think of these type of days as really important and build towards them and make it a big thing in the workplace to make people become aware of people with disabilities. Another one too is the National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which I don't have on the slide. But that's actually in the month of October. And that one was actually declared in 1988. And I didn't know it actually went that far back, but it's the month to showcase support inclusive employment policy and practices for people with disabilities. So, I thought in closing, it would be good to talk about different ways where, we can make a difference. Hey, let's use that month of October to, pump up, the employment awareness for people with disabilities. So there's just such a massive tool of people with disabilities out there that can be tapped into that I think we're heading on a good road. I think people are seeing it. They're making differences in the workplace. And it's just, we just don't want to go stale. We just want to continue to push in the right directions. It can be a win-win for a place of employment, a win-win for an employee who has a disability. So many things are definitely better today than they were in the past. And like I said, I thought in closing, it'd be good to include the Awareness Day and also the month of October, just to reiterate the importance of people with disabilities and inclusion. So that wraps up my training, and just want to thank everybody for their time. And Director Patrick, she's got a lot of experience, so a lot of questions. If you have them for me or her, we're all ears.
I want to thank Director Patrick, and you as well, Stephen, for presenting today. And I just wanted to point out for our specialists and Apprenticeship Illinois partners on the call, so many of the great pieces of advice you pointed out for when we're working with employers on developing a program, taking a look at those hiring requirements to make sure that they're not leaving anybody out of the equation. Referring employers who may have concerns about employing individuals with disabilities to those great ADA resources. There's so much we can do to help ensure that the programs we work on and work to develop are accessible. And so I thank you for the great information, sincerely.
Welcome.
Also, I had a question for you, Director Patrick or Stephen. So I know that Tony Furman down in the East Metro St. Louis area has a program where he works with the high schools with people with disabilities as well. And then working with this, like I think the city, the local city, and even the local conference center and things of that nature where they're working in an apprenticeship. And I'm working with a group that's outside of outside of Chicago that Director Patrick and I got to the site that we went to, Director Patrick, we got to see what they were doing there. And they're building a program for people with disabilities to work in warehouses, to do the picking and filling orders and things of that nature. And we're seeing about making that a pre-apprenticeship and then into an apprenticeship because they have employers on board that are really excited about that. Do you all have any other examples of like employers that have really worked with you and that or the different kinds of occupations, or how we can come about with more apprenticeships with people with disabilities because it seems to be a talent pool that is untapped.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks. This is Rani. Thank you. So on my slide deck, there was somebody, like they had their hand on their hip, they're in t-shirt, and there was a person in a wheelchair in the middle. That was a company here in Illinois called The Bazaar, BAZAAR, I think. And they we awarded them for, and the industry was like packaging, as you could tell from Kevin, the young man in the wheelchair that had like a package of like green bottles in front of him. And so it's like, it could be any industry. Government as an industry has really grown in Illinois. And we had, it sounds small, but there was like 52 new people that was brought into the workforce in the state of Illinois last year. And there is a report that has to be made for that. So, self-employment, so entrepreneurship is also another area for people. So the examples of employers, just to get to your question, have been government, as you raised down, like Tony has been able to develop those kind of like local government registered apprenticeship roles. And we're hopeful that maybe we'll be able to get some other industries, technology, manufacturing, things like that could be opportunities. I'm not an expert on it. I'd be happy for other business consultants, though, to work on this question. I don't know, Stephen, if you have anything to add, given the breadth of your expertise.
No, not really. I mean, most of my experience was just working, in state government. So it was, more internal stakeholders. So like businesses and stuff, I didn't really have much experience with that. So I don't have a good answer for that.
That's okay. It looks like Lori Kittner has her hand.
Yeah, Director Patrick knows I'll always speak up. I'm Lori Kittner. I'm the Assistant Bureau Chief for Division of Rehab in Northern Illinois, the collar counties, out to Rockford and Freeport. So I can say one of the biggest industries we have right now through our project search and just through general placement is in the medical industry. So our project search program picks up after students exit public school education, whether that's at 18 or, as they're getting closer to 22, which is the magic number for exiting for special ed students. So in that last year, they have an opportunity to participate in project search. And most of the locations that we have currently are at hospitals and medical, those types of medical facilities. And the reason that is because they have just such a wide variety of job opportunities in so many different fields. So they may be doing anything from inventory control in the, kind of the warehouse and procurement area of the hospital, to food service, to actual patient transport, patient care, minimal patient care, I would say, like working with a CNA or, something like that. Uh, just lots of hands-on things with in a variety of departments. We even have folks who've been doing cart prep for surgeries for in the emergency room. That's a real awesome job for a lot of our students. And with Project Search, they do 3 different what we call internships. And then after that, we help with the job search portion. So that is real similar to an apprenticeship. I can see things, developing that way for different apprenticeships. I've also worked with students in manufacturing apprenticeships, the trades, of course, everybody wants into the trades. So we work with a lot of students with learning disabilities, again, ADHD, even, mental health issues. So I guess that, all that to say that the opportunities are as varied for apprenticeships and for jobs for people with disabilities as there are disabilities, which, run the gamut for eligibility for DRS from, like I said, learning disabilities, ADHD, some mental health issues, all the way through folks who have significant physical disabilities and sensory disabilities. So it just depends on what the job seeker's looking for and what the opportunity is at the time. Thanks.
And this is Ronnie. I just wanted to point out that if you remember that map of all of our local offices, Lori is the assistant bureau chief over one of our regions. Lori, it's number 2. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Region 2. I have 10 offices. Actually, I have 11, but we're in the process of moving one to Region 3. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
And I have one more question. You did mention tax credits. Do you have funding available? So that's one thing that when our apprenticeship specialists are out there, employers are asking, is there any kind of funding that could help either pay for the related training or could offset some of the wages or things of that nature? Does DHS have something like that as well?
I can answer that because Stephen looks like a deer with that in the headlights. Yes, we can. We have programs by which we can help pay. I believe it's half of the first like 6 months of work, pay half of the for a trial work period where we kick in towards the pay during that trial work period. There are also, various tax credits where we would give the information on what the tax credit is called. And I can't remember the one that Stephen mentioned a little bit ago, but it's like a work incentive tax credit. Those aren't things that we fund, but it is a credit from the federal government. Another thing that we do quite often is help people with their SSI and do benefits planning and help them learn how to continue to receive their Social Security benefits while they're working, so that they can try out, try and give working an opportunity, give it a chance without losing their federal benefits, which makes it a lot more comfortable for the person with the disability to go to work, So that's not necessarily something that the employer would get, but it certainly makes things a lot easier and a lot more comfortable for the individual with a disability.
Thank you. That was all my questions.
Do we have any other questions before wrapping up today's session? Thank you again, Stephen and Ronnie. It was a great presentation and very informative.
Jordan, there was one question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Sarah Cleveland says, I recall the department having a community college tuition program. Is that the case?
Yep. Yes, it is. I'll put that in the link. Put a link there.
This webinar will be uploaded later to the Apprenticeship Illinois website, and we will also have the PowerPoint with the couple links that were in there as well. So you can reference that at a later time if you want to revisit it as well. Any other questions?
Thank you all. Oh, sorry.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Nope. Just want to make sure I'll leave this open for anyone who wants that link. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.